All right, go ahead, Mike.
Hello, my name is Michael Schauch, and this is Your Superior Self.
Mike, my man, thank you so much for joining. I can't wait for this conversation because you're an author, the author of the book, A Story of Karma. Didn't know it was, the cover is a little misleading because, well, not really, I guess. It's about a little girl, but, I'm thinking karma is like the traditional karma, like reincarnation karma. Totally not that at all. But it is about a little girl who you fall in love with during the book because she's just so, she's a beautiful person. And thank you for coming on the show, man. This is going to be exciting.
Thank you so much, Trey. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So let's go ahead and get into it. So this book, did you ever think you'd write this book?
Well, it's funny that you say that because no, I mean, the short answer is no. But when I was in my, actually when I was about 15, 16 in high school, I had this dream of being this writer, and writing was always my best subject in school and high school. My teacher would often read my stuff, and he'd kind of encouraged me to submit my work to publication, which I didn't do at that time. But when I got into university, I thought, I had this dream of becoming a creative writer, and I thought that's what I would be. And then I remember I wrote my first assignment. It was write an essay about your favorite place in the outdoors that had positively impacted you. And as somebody who loves the mountains and loves the outdoors, I thought, oh, this is the assignment of my dreams. And this was my very first assignment at university. And I just poured my heart into it. And I checked it over again. I'm like, yep, no, I'm sure of it. This is the best piece of writing I have ever done. And submitted it, got it back. Was anxiously awaiting what the professor would say. And when I got it, I saw this letter. It was like a totally foreign letter to me. And it was an F.
How you get an F?
Like, yeah, I'm still kind of asking. I know. I'm still kind of asking myself that question, and I'm like, wow, I'd never gotten an F in anything, let alone, what I thought was my best subject. And anyway, so that was basically the beginning of the end of my interest in taking creative writing in university. But I went on this whole journey into the business world, and a little business that I had on the side, and that's a whole nother story that I had started, that started going through the roof. And so I thought, well, and the more I looked into this whole business world, I thought, these guys are awesome over here. They're all about creativity. They're all about thinking outside the box. So I was thinking, I want to hang out with these guys. And so I just dove into the world of business. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, I kind of returned back to writing. That's another story, but we had this journey in 2012, which was kind of the beginning of this of the story, like the story in the book. Mm-hmm. And then that eventually turned into a story of karma. But even in 2012, I didn't have the intention of writing it. It wasn't until years later. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell how that came about.
This book, I mean, like, it's just crazy how this came about, because like your trip over there wasn't like what you thought it would be. Like, you're going over to climb I guess some mountains that you had seen on a friend's phone, and that you immediately needed to climb because it drew you, right? Like, I mean, I felt like you described it like it was these mountains that you had to climb.
For sure. Yeah. No, it was I don't know. Some mountains kind of do that to me. You see them, not every mountain, but some mountains, they just hit me right in the core. And I had this idea in my mind since I was a kid that I wanted to climb in the Himalaya. And so I didn't know where. Like I had it one time, I thought maybe I wanted to climb Mount Everest or something like that, but I'm a mountaineering fanatic. But I knew I didn't want to go somewhere, like I wanted to be off the beaten path, right? I didn't want to go where everybody else was going. So when we sat down with that friend in the coffee shop one day, and he was showing us, he had been trekking in Nepal for over 20 years and in some of the most obscure places. And he said, Mike, I got to tell you about this place called the Lost Valley of Narfu. And he kind of had me at Lost Valley, but
yeah, I mean, he got me going. I want to go there now.
Yeah, I know. And this is back in 20. So we were sitting down in 2011. So just a few years prior to that, this valley had been opened up. Before that, it had been totally closed off to the outside world. And so he was showing me these pictures, and I mean, the pictures looked like the people were authentically connected to the way that they'd been living for hundreds of years. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is where we got to go. And then I came across that picture of that pyramid mountain, which literally looked like a white pyramid coming out of the earth. I mean, it was the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever seen. And I thought, this is the mountain. This is the time. This is the mountain. This is the place. And my wife was there. My wife Chantal. And we put this little team together of artists. We thought, okay, well, let's get because we understood from our friend there that the valley was going to experience some change because now that it had been opened. So we thought, okay, well, let's bring a little team of artists so we can learn and observe it from the people and sort of capture a moment in time before it changes too much. And so we brought a photographer, we brought a nature artist, we brought a musician, and then Chantal and I, we would do some filming. And so that was kind of the intention. But in the back of my mind, I had this whole sort of personal agenda of climbing that mountain.
Mm. Did you ever climb that mountain?
No, I didn't.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
Yeah, I didn't even set foot on it.
But you went to try, right? Like I remember there's a part in the story where you went and you looked for it, but something happened. Like was it a storm or something like that where you couldn't do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. The funny thing is, yeah, we got into that valley, and I got to say that valley, you could feel it almost felt like a different presence. Like we were in a place that actually the Tibetans call it a Bayul, which means sacred valley. And the Dalai Lama himself has said it's a place where the physical and spiritual realms kind of coalesce closer together. So you can feel that.
The gate, though, or the going into it, like
Oh
there's
yeah,
this section in here, like the photos, like I've just been fascinated by that, like the actual to go into this valley. Like you had talked about what the feeling was like when you guys were struggling for like especially your wife at that point, and then once you guys got there, it was like a whole different vibe, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Chantal, she had suffered from these debilitating migraines leading up to getting to that gate, and which was really kind of devastating for me to see. I don't know, if you've ever had, or if listeners have had a migraine, like I've never had one, but I've seen Chantal go through them, and these migraine attacks can just be lethal. Like you just can't do anything and can't function. And so she had an attack like right in the middle of this valley, and that's right when we were trying to get into we were basically coming right into through those gates, right? And I thought, wow, I'm in the place that I've dreamed of being my whole life, and now everything's at risk. Maybe we have to turn around. Like Chantal might have to go back, and there's no way I'm going to let her go down by herself. So the whole thing was kind of in jeopardy. But yeah, she's very strong physically, and also very strong minded, and she managed to get herself through those gates. And I kid you not, she said when she walked through, she's like, I am having the highest high of my life. Like I was having the lowest low of my life like 2 days ago, but now I'm having the highest high of my life. And she felt like she was just healing by being in that valley. And we all felt it as we walked through that gate. It almost felt like we walked through an orb of some sort into a different realm of energies, like sensations shifted, colors changed. It was just the most mind-blowing thing. I mean, so that was the kind of the feeling that we had when we were in there. And then I thought, okay, well, we had the last little village is called Fu. That's the most remote outpost in this whole valley. And that was kind of my staging ground to go and find this mountain. And so I spent 2 days reconnaissance trying to find it with I had 2 Sherpa guides with me, and we found it. But, to your question, that's when everything started falling apart. We got caught in a snowstorm at 17,000 feet. My mule carrying my climbing gear just took off on me, and so, so all these things started unraveling and just kind of forced me to hunker down in this little remote outpost village of Fu.
Mm. And on your way back, I mean, it's just so. I just love everything about this, like this story, because it reminds me a lot about my life, right? And like I didn't travel to the Himalaya. Um, I didn't, travel across, different countries, different, states. But we all have personal, like, wantings, right? Like we have personal
Mhm.
goals, dreams, and like you go after it and it totally turns into something you totally didn't expect. And same thing with my life, right? Like I feel like I'm going after something and then it's like fate or the universe totally flips it around and like I end up doing something totally different, but it makes me so much more content or it makes me so much more complete. It's so
Mhm.
and it's incredibly miraculous and like mystical, like how these things happen. I mean, just some of the descriptions. I mean, this isn't an F like by any means in creative writing.
Yeah, I mean,
This
that's one of
book,
the that's one of the most popular questions I get, is like, how did this professor give you an F with this level of writing? But I don't know. It's a
that's
grand mystery.
awesome. That is. When did you meet Karma? Like, describe that scene. Like, Karma is the little girl in this book that has ultimately changed your life. What?
Yeah, yeah,
When did you meet her?
yeah, it happened. It actually happened relatively late in the journey, and it happened actually on our way back. We were on our way back home, because I couldn't climb the mountain, it kind of gave us a couple extra days to visit this other little village called Nar. There's only two main villages in this whole valley, and so we thought, oh, let's just go check out this other one. And when we got there, I learned that there was this little stone school. Prior to that, everything we had seen, there was basically no outside education for these kids. And I had met some of the locals and gotten to know them and learned how education was just such an important piece for them in the valley out there, because the kids, if you imagine these valleys, I mean, or these villages in this valley, they're far out there. There's no electricity. At that time, there was not even any toilets. There was no communication to the outside world, no books other than the scriptures and the monasteries. Um, so, they're kind of, they were on their own. I mean, things have changed now a little bit over the years since it was open, but at that time, they were really cut off from everything. And so the villagers, I mean, I learned a saying that they had up there, which was they'd rather their kids have a pencil in the hand versus a strap around the forehead. Because if you imagine how the Nepalis, they carry the loads, they don't carry like us with a backpack, they carry with like an actual strap around their forehead. And I tried carrying something like that. It's extremely difficult. But yeah, so they want their kids, they know that if the kids have education, that just kind of opens up more choice for them in life, because kids, by the time they're 6, 7 years old, they have to start working hard labor in the field. Some of the girls at that time, by the time they're 15, 16 years old, they're getting married, having their own families. So, I mean, again, it's just a totally different way, right? And they know that the education kind of helps them break out of that, so to speak. But yeah, so when we caught wind that there was this little stone school in this village, I thought, wow, we should check this out. And we get there, and there's 17 kids. They had pulled their benches out because the classrooms, they're too dark and cold. So they wanted to be under the sun. And there at the head of the class, there was this little girl, a little 7-year-old girl teaching English numbers to this group of kids. And the English script differs than Nepali or Tibetan script. So we were just kind of all looking at each other like, why is this little girl, this little 7-year-old girl, teaching this group of kids English numbers? It's
Where's the
just
teacher? Like, where's the teacher go?
yeah,
But he was
yeah,
standing back behind everybody, right? Like he just kind of was observing.
yeah, exactly. We found him. He was back there, kind of looming, and he, we talked with him, and he came from a totally different place in Nepal. Like his village was 2 weeks away. His family, he was like away from everybody he knew. And he kind of expressed to us that he felt like he had been banished to the end of the earth, sort of thing. So he didn't really have a desire to be there or to teach these kids. But and we had actually heard that some teachers, because they get assigned by the government to go out there, but some teachers end up just abandoning their post because it's too remote. Nobody checks up on them, but they still collect the salary. So anyway, but he was there, and but the kids, they caught sight of Michael, our musician, and his guitar. You know, they had his guitar slung over his shoulder. They have no instruments up there at that time, and
Wow.
they had never seen a guitar, let alone heard one. So they were kind of, you could tell the kids were really like, "Hey, can you play some music? Can we?" You know? And he was, you know, he's an entertainer. If you imagine kind of like this neo hippie, sort of like blonde hair and a purple bandana and pointed goatee, and he gets up there and starts teaching these kids some like this jazzed up rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And I thought, Michael, what are you doing? Like, you know, this is a really complicated version of this song.
Show it off. Like, seriously,
Yeah,
these kids have never seen music or, you know, music, like an instrument, or he's like sitting there like ripping.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like
Just going to town.
going to
And
town.
but yeah, but the kids, they caught on. I was amazed. I mean, I was like, wow, these kids are like really getting it, and they were getting into, like, they were grooving and dancing and singing, and and then the teacher, I guess he even got motivated, and he wanted the kids to dance.
He
He
starts
brought out
doing
this.
it. He wanted to do his job. He's like, yeah, you know what? I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. Let's start doing a jig. Like,
Yeah,
start doing.
exactly. Yeah, so he brings out this Nepali drum, and he starts playing that, wanting the kids to dance one at a time in front of us. And he chooses this little girl who was, you know, kind of so confident, right? She was so confidently teaching before, but he kind of put her on the spot, and he just said, you know, dance, like come on, dance. You know, and she was just totally stunned. Like, you know, she was kind of like a petrified little thing in the corner there, and you could almost tell like she was internally crying almost. I mean, just imagine, like, okay, you put on the spot in front of your classmates, in front of these people who you have no idea, you know, they look like they're from a totally different world. And now, and she doesn't even really know how to dance, maybe, but anyway, so there she was, and Chantal, my wife, she just couldn't take it. She's like, I got to go up there. So she just marched up and starts doing her kind of best impression of like this Nepali dance. Oh, we're like, Chantal, what are you doing? But the little
Awesome.
girl, she forgot everything. She forgot, you know, everyone watching her, and she just kind of totally focused on Chantal. Their eyes kind of locked in this one scene, and you know, you imagine these two, almost like two little spirits, kind of dancing together in front of these massive 7,000 meter Himalayan peaks. It was just the most magical sight, and it almost felt like time kind of stood still for a moment. But yeah, that's kind of where things started changing for me, in terms of this realization.
Well, when she told you her name, like, what did that feel like? Like when she said, "Yeah, my name's Karma," and you're like, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing." It's like God saying, "Yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing here."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chantal and I, we just looked at each other like, yeah, I mean, how could it
What's your
have
name,
been?
little girl? Karma. Told you.
Yeah, exactly.
We're supposed to be here right now.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the way it felt. Like, it's hard for me to put it into words, but it just felt like there were these doorways, these invisible doorways just opening. And even though, you know, if I rewind back to my struggle of walking away from the mountain, just like a part of my identity had kind of died on up there in the mountains. Part of my identity, I guess, was reborn, but I didn't know into what at that time. And so it just felt like everything inside of me, even though everything inside of me wanted to move in one direction, kind of to your point, like everything outside of me was guiding me in a different direction. And I didn't know, you know, again, I didn't know where, but I had to trust, you know, I chose to trust in that, in those opening doors, and all these little synchronicities, these little signs kind of started popping up. The more that I would follow that sort of natural flow of events, the more things just, it's almost like pieces of puzzle just kind of coming together, like clicking into place one after the next. And then that's what it's been like for the last 9 years. I mean, that was kind of the spark that started everything. But that's kind of the way that life has been unfolding ever since. And not to say that it's easy, but it just feels like, okay, yeah, this is
Feels
all
right,
happening.
right? It
Yeah, it
feels
feels
right.
yeah, totally.
Like, so how long were you up there? Like, how long was your trip?
We were in the mountains for about four weeks.
4 weeks. And so during this time, you meet a little girl named Karma. You meet her family, right? Like, I mean, it's just a whole
Mm,
different world up there, right? It's just completely culture
mm,
shock from what we're used to over here in the West. I mean, you see the families are working hard in the fields. The kids are, they're going to school and very little supervision in the school system there, right? Like they're
Mm.
just kind of like they're kind of doing their own thing, really. And this little girl comes up to you, and she really just melts your heart, and you guys have a very strong connection.
Mhm.
At what point were you like, we want to help you? Like, how did that, I mean, I know how it went about, but for my
Yeah.
listeners that haven't read the book, like, how did that come about? And like, when was that point where you were like, we want to reach out to her and try to help her?
Yeah. Yeah. So after, actually, it was after they got out of school, and they found kind of where we were camping, and this little girl, she just kind of bolted in, just ran into Chantal's arms and gave her, like Chantal told me afterwards, it was the biggest heart to heart hug she had ever received from a child. And then Karma, she jumped, like she just leaped into my arms. And I'll never forget, like I was like, whoa, I felt her heartbeat against mine. I felt her like little hands like grabbing the back of my neck. I was like, in that split second or half a second, everything became clear. I'm like, this is the reason why I'm not climbing the mountain.
Mm.
But then she did something very interesting. Some of her friends came over, and they were asking for chocolate and candy because they've seen some trekkers kind of coming through and bringing some of that now, or at that time. But she didn't want anything like that. And she waited till they were done, and then she came back and she pulled out this little laminate card with English words on it. And all she did was she kind of motioned to Chantal, like, can you speak these words? She just wanted to learn them. And that's when Chantal and we really looked at each other like, wow, I mean, all this girl, materially, they have very little up there. It's pure survival. Um, and all she wants is to learn. So we thought, okay, well, why don't we meet with her family? We started asking questions like, what happens? I mean, I knew some of the story from our discussion earlier, and what I had learned from other locals or other villagers, but I was like, well, what's the plan for this little girl? Like, what's going to happen to her? What do her parents want for her? And so I said, we should meet with her parents, and we were able to find her home. Karma actually brought us in by the hand, and her father was 2 days away. He was with the yaks, and her mother was still working in the fields at that time. But she brought us into this little stone house, kind of, one room, maybe the size of a typical North American bedroom or something like that. A single dung fueled stove in the middle. And she put out the kind of these yak wool mats for us to sit on. She started getting the fire going. She put on the kettle for the tea, and she was doing all this while looking after her 3-year-old sister. And again, I was just thinking, wow, can you imagine a 7-year-old girl doing that in North America? Or I don't know. I mean, it's just, where do you find that? So Chantal and I were just like, wow, okay, this is amazing. And then her mom comes home, and her mom is just this beautiful, like just graceful woman. I mean, again, been working really hard in the fields for 12 hours probably. And I mean, very weathered, right? But just very graceful, and immediately starts making us tea. And anyway, we have this broken conversation, or through broken translation, this
Yeah.
conversation, and learn that education for them, for their girls, is the biggest blessing that they could ever hope for and ask for. And so that's when we thought, okay, well, why don't we work together? Because there's no way that they can afford the education for their girls, and the education exists outside of the village. That little school there maybe scratches the surface of grade 1. But most of the kids, in order to get an outside education, would have to leave the village and go to a boarding school. And so we thought, well, why don't we work together to find some sort of solution for Karma? And we asked Karma, we said, hey, is this something you would want? And Karma said, yes, she would very much love to study. So we said, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll work with your parents, and let's all kind of come up with some sort of solution. And Chantal and I, then we left the village, and we had no idea what we would find. We knew that it had to be somewhere sort of culturally aligned, because up in the mountains, they're actually more Tibetan they're Tibetan culturally, and whereas most of Nepal is actually Hindu, and they operate more on a caste system. So
Sure.
there's a lot of discrimination against the mountain people. So we knew that the school had to be safe and be culturally aligned from that perspective. But anyway, that opened up that whole journey in finding the school for her, and that's a whole other story in itself.
Yeah, but I love it. I love that story. I love how well you find a school, right? But you have to go talk to the headmaster or something like that, who's a spiritual guy. Like
Yeah. We end up
just you don't have to tell me
finding.
the whole story.
Mm.
Just tell me that how crazy that experience was talking to him. Like, because like I just think of like I don't this presence, this like, you got to be very respectful of customs. You got to make sure you do the right things. I feel like I wouldn't say the right thing. Like I feel like I would have to like, you're supposed to bow or whatever. But explain that
Mm.
experience.
Yeah. No, this I didn't realize it at the time, but this gentleman, this Lama, high-ranking monk, he is up there in the ranks. I mean, he is yeah, he's almost as high as you can go. Just right below the Dalai Lama in some way.
Right below
Um,
the Dalai Lama. To get her into this boarding school, you got to talk to the guy that's right below the Dalai Lama.
I mean, I mean, there's different lineages, but if you imagine the Dalai Lamas in one lineage, there's another person called the Karmapa, which is basically the leader of that lineage, who's equivalent to the Dalai Lama. And then this gentleman we spoke with is one step below that. So, but he founded that school. And the funny thing is that he's the only one that could admit new kids into that school. And he happened to be at his monastery recovering from an illness, 25-minute drive from our home in Canada.
Karma.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Karma.
I couldn't. I'm like, I couldn't plan this. I just
No, like what's the chance? Like seriously, like you're trying to get this thing lined up. It doesn't look like it's going to work because the school's already packed. But this lady who's over there that's helping you guys try to get Karma into the school, like she's a godsend. She's like somebody that's trying to help you out. You find out this guy that you got to talk to is 25 minutes from you in Canada, not over there, like right here.
He could have been anywhere in the world. I mean, he's got,
Yeah.
he could have been, who knows where, but yeah, 25 minutes away from our house. And I just thought, wow. And that's where he happened to be. He was only there for a few days, and that's where he happened to be. And anyway, we ended up meeting with him. He to your question, I mean, he was, I've never seen anybody glowing before. But being in his presence, he had this kind of this soft white aura around him. But more than that, being in his presence was almost like having my soul exposed.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
You couldn't hide anything. It's like,
crap.
Yeah.
I would not like that at all.
It's kind of wild. I mean, it's just I nearly broke down into tears just from I don't know, all these emotions that were coming out, and joy, and just wow, just awe and everything. And I just started pouring basically just started, and I kind of like just didn't even I wasn't even aware of what I was saying. I was just kind of like almost like pleading for this little girl's life. And
sure.
I mean, that's kind of how it felt. And at the end of it, he said, she can be admitted into the school. This is back in 2012. And he said, yeah, she can be admitted into the school. And so that's been we've been going back to Nepal every 8 to 10 months and just kind of growing our families together, which has been the most meaningful and beautiful experience of my life. Just, I never thought, having a mountain would kind of, or pursuing that mountain would take me, into this village where I would connect and expand, our family with this little family out there, and having Karma and her little sister Pemba eventually got into the school, and just all the experiences we've had together. I mean, it's just been, just been amazing.
One mountain.
Yeah.
One mountain. I mean, you think about that though, right? Like, everybody uses that as a metaphor. Like a literal mountain has brought you to where you're at today. Like, so you pay for, well, I'm trying not to give it away too much. I'm trying to like tiptoe around it because it's such a beautiful story. I guess what I want to ask you, because of just my own curiosity, how is Karma doing today?
Yeah, she's well, it's interesting. Yeah. Again, I guess
don't tell me something bad. Don't tell me. Don't, like, seriously.
No, but I mean, the thing is that, well, the funny thing is the book actually ended before COVID, right? So, the COVID, I didn't even know, nobody knew about it, by the time I put the last period on the page. And so there's been this whole nother, I mean, I feel like I could write a sequel right now based on
Oh my
everything
God.
that's happened. Yeah, no, they went, they actually had to go back to their village. So the school that they were in, the school that we talked about, is in Kathmandu. They well, I'll give it away a little bit. They actually ended up coming to Canada for a cultural exchange, an education exchange. Their parents, we spoke with them about that, and the parents actually expressed a lot of interest for them. They're like, oh, well, can they see where you guys are from? You guys are always coming over here.
Sure.
What if they expanded their dreams by seeing what what another place is like in the world? And so that took a small miracle. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, so they were here living with us. We became parents overnight. And but then they went back.
How was that?
I mean, that I mean, Chantal and I, we don't have our own kids, right, by choice. But I was like, wow, I mean, having suddenly a how old were they at the time? 14 and 10-year-old, kind of, like
I have 3 kids now. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, how old are your kids?
Well, my oldest is going to be 11, but I mean, they're different though, right? So, I mean, my 11-year-old and my 9-year-old and my 3-year, or my, I guess she's going to be 3 this year. They're totally different than what Karma and her sister are, because they come from a different culture. It's totally different. I mean, a 14-year-old coming over here is probably equivalent to like an 8-year-old probably here, right? Like, I mean, I just feel like not learning, but I mean, like, just the sensitivity to the culture, right? Like, just, I'm sure it was like sensitivity over, like, senses overwhelming, like, just kind of like coming into Canada or, whatever, just totally culture shock, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird that, yeah, because we were thinking some of the same things. And it's interesting that, because out there it's different, right? I mean, in the village, like they've seen death, right? They've seen sickness and extreme poverty and all these things, right? But extreme beauty, right? Being in the mountains, surviving in the mountains. What does that even mean? Trying to bring in their harvest. Yeah. So all these, like, they've seen all these different things that kids perhaps here are more sheltered from.
You're absolutely right. I don't mean to cut you off, but that I have to
Yeah.
say this, right? Like, so you're absolutely right. They see beauty. They see, even though they see death, there's beauty in that over there. It's not like it's not hidden like it is here, like.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I remember the first time I learned about what they call the sky burial out there. And the sky burial, it's in Tibetan tradition. They, when somebody dies, they essentially they cut their body apart into pieces and spread it out onto this big slab rock, so that the vultures can eat it, because everything goes back to the earth, right? So it's a big cycle. They look at things like a cycle, right? So once you have left your body is just an empty vessel now.
Sure.
And so let's give that back to the earth.
How about you just toss me off the side of a mountain instead of having a vulture come and shit me out? You know what I mean? Like, toss me off the mountain. I'd rather that than you some vulture eat me. You know what I mean? Peck my eyeballs out. There's Dad.
Roll me down.
Yeah, just toss me into the valley. Take me back to the earth.
Yeah, all these different customs, right? So, and kids here, I mean, if you did that in front of a kid here, a 10-year-old,
God, it's therapy. Leave me in the woods, and I, things start, around where we're at, it'd be like, raccoons and stuff pulling me out, and they'd be scarred forever.
So yeah, but totally different. But then the weird thing about it is that they don't have the exposure to all the social media and pop culture at that age, and at that time. So I think, in some ways they're more mature because they can, they've seen all those things that we talked about and they can survive out there and whatnot. But then on the flip side, a lot of kids here at that age were more mature in the way that they, I don't know, looked at like relationships maybe, or just the way they dress, more grown up, like, so there's differences, like these stark differences, and yeah,
I just love their philosophy though. I love, like, even in India, death is visible in the streets, right? Like they march the death through the streets. It's just, different. Like it's even the East, even like with the adults, it's like, I was reading Andrew Harvey's book, who is a mystic, and he was talking about his stay in India, or was it Tibet maybe, and how everybody's having tea together. Like everybody just rolls out, hangs out at the neighbor's house, drinking tea, you know. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm shutting the curtains, you know what I mean? Like somebody comes to my house, like ringing the doorbell. I'm like, no, man, like go. It's not like I'll text you, if I want
Right,
you to come
right.
hang
Yeah.
out. But over there, it's just going to do the drop in,
Yeah.
come hang out. Everybody's cool. Like it's just a different vibe, which we need to get back
Mm.
more to, right? Like, I mean, just kind of like that, I don't know. It's like this sense of community, like,
I think so. Yeah. Those were some of the bigger differences that I started noticing, about spending time there and spending time here in terms of the kids, like observing the kids and kids there, because I kind of started noticing what was being fostered, right? Here in North America, we tend to celebrate the individual, right? We put the individual up on the front cover of a magazine, or we, highlight names of people who have done great things and all that stuff. But there, it was more about celebrating community. So here, again, it's about what can I get? What can I accumulate? What can I get? There, it was more about, how do I share more? How do I give more away? So there were these kind of little nuances that I started picking up on with the kids. And so when they came here, and we could see that in practice, it was just very fascinating. The level of emotional intelligence of those girls was just off the charts. I was like, wow. I mean, and just sort of the mindfulness, and yeah, it's kind of, it was more in the detail. I remember one time I I was cooking dinner, and Pemba, the little one, she kind of came up to me. She said, "Oh, I want to help you cook dinner." And I said, "Oh, Pemba, you don't have to help me cook dinner. You can go and play or create art or do whatever you want to do." And she just looked at me. She's like, "Why don't you want me to help you cook?" And I thought,
I got to put it in the microwave. It takes 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, we don't have a microwave, but I for them, it was like part of the process, right? It was like being part of the meal preparation, whereas maybe kids here are not wanting to do that. I don't know, but for them, it was just like, I want to be with you. I want to prepare this together. This is part of the dinner, actually preparing the meal. So another time we were kind of running around, and I remember we were late for something. You know how it is with the kids, right? You kind of have to go, and things are in a rush. And I was like, "Girls, we got to run. We got to grab our shoes and jackets." And Pemba, she just put her hand on my arm, and she said, "Mike," she said, "if we behaved like this in my village, everybody would think they were sick."
That's so funny. That is so funny.
So I'm like, you're right. Let's just breathe again. Let's, calm down. So again, little things like that were just fascinating. But yeah, so they came here, they had the experience, they went back to their school in Kathmandu, and then the school shut down because of COVID. COVID hit Kathmandu actually quite hard. So then they ended up going back to their village, where they spent, they spent maybe 9 months in their village. But having the lenses of having been in Kathmandu, which is like a totally different world from their village, having been here in North America, and then going back, trying to, contrasting things now, right? And we'd have calls with them and just seeing how things were going. But the most mind-blowing things, again, I mean, I remember one time Karma and Pemba, they were telling me about how they were bringing the goats in, and they said, "Mike, you never believe what happened." I said, "What happened?" And they said, "Well, we were bringing the goats in, and the goats, they were kind of acting funny, and we came around this corner, and there was this snow leopard dragging a goat up a cliff face." And so they were all freaked out because the snow leopard the goat was kind of bleeding, and they were trying to scare the snow leopard away. The snow leopard dropped the goat, and the goat came tumbling down, and Pemba was she was crying because the goat was like dying. And I just thought, wow, the kids or friends over here are just playing video games right now.
Yeah, they've never even seen that before. Like, what's a goat?
Right. Yeah. I just thought, wow. So, I mean, the experience, I feel really blessed for the kind of rich experiences that they're getting in their young years. And I think that, I heard from somebody a while ago that he said the best the best gift we can give to our kids is the gift of resilience. And I just thought, wow, I really feel that these girls are getting that kind of gift of resilience. And no matter what happens, in the world, what happens, what's kind of thrown their way, they're kind of cultivating this ability to adapt and sort of think differently on a dime, pivot,
Love that.
right?
Yeah, I love that.
So I think that's, I feel really blessed for them in that way.
Sure. No, I think just giving them that support to be what they want to be or go where they want to go. Not forcing them to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. Like over here, it's a lot about the sports, right? And usually, typically, doing what the parents did, either baseball, football, whatever, and then the kids not really liking it, and then just being a terrible, terrible time for them, or even like doing something that the parents never really were into, being more creative, art, songs, instruments, things like that, that were typically looked as, not cool, but
Yeah.
supporting them, right, and supporting
Yeah.
them and nurturing whatever that curiosity is, and just allowing them to figure out who they are. Like that's what we need more of. Like
I think that's huge. Yeah. That's one of the biggest things they taught me, right? Was just, like you said, I mean, we tend to have these expectations of not only kids, but of people over here, right?
Sure.
And of anyone in a relationship or, whatever. But one of the biggest lessons that they taught me was just, not to get so attached to the expectations that we have of others. And just like you said, to support them in their journey of who they actually are.
Yeah.
To guide them or help guide them, but support them in who they are. And I think that was a huge one.
What about the temples over there? Did you ever see any of those?
Oh yeah, no, we there's lots of monasteries, temples.
What is it?
I
Is
mean,
it Buddhism, like the big one over there?
yeah. So the two main ones, so Hinduism and Buddhism, are both are very present in Nepal, and I remember when we our first trip there back in 2012 when we visited that temple, Pashupatinath. It's a Hindu temple. And going back to our earlier conversation, it was like a flood of everything, a flood of emotions in one scene. You had, I mean, people, the reason why they go there is to die, like for the dead, because they
Sure.
cremate them on these pyres. And so you get there and you have these bodies burning. But then you have, this kind of river, this polluted river, the Bagmati, that's coming down, and you have these little girls with rolled up pants and bare feet trying to find any trinket that they can that had been shoveled off the pyre with the ashes of the burning bodies. And then you've got like some guy defecating in the river upstream, and then you got a family picnicking downstream, and you've got the most beautiful carved temples and buildings, and you've got people dying of leprosy and the sick, and so you've got all of this in one scene, and it's just like, wow. I mean, that life, death, sickness, everything in beauty, like all of it in one place, and in the emotions that surfaced. But like you said, I mean, for them, I remember one Nepali girl, she was reading my book and she said, wow, she said, Mike, because I talk about that scene in the book, and she said, I feel like I just relived that place through your eyes. And I kind of, because for her, it's totally normal. She'd been going there since she was a kid, but she thought, wow, I didn't realize it was kind of such a shock for people who are not used to that. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like you said, there's a beauty in that, right? Like there's this beauty in that. I mean, you definitely want to be upstream,
Right.
but there's a beauty in it. It's like everything you talked about in that, right? Like, it's just like this. You can't even name it. You just look at it. Even the pictures, even in the book, it's just like everyone is, even though they're in this remote area of the world, living in these like rock-looking like huts. Everybody's hanging out. Everybody's smiling. Everybody looks like they're having a great time. I mean, the environment is just beautiful, like the rocks, the snow. I mean, just the color, like were describing. Like they're out there working 12 hours in the field. They come back, like they have tea with you. They're carrying stuff on their heads. This huge like picture of a guy with all this stuff on his back. But they couldn't be, from what I can tell, more happy.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
it's just different. It's a different way. I mean, we, you know, I mean, first of all, they're like, what I'm really thrilled about is the girls are incredibly proud of where they're from, which I thought,
Well, that
that's
was a big determination in their schooling, right? Like you didn't want
mm,
them to lose that.
totally. Yeah. Their dad said two things to me. Over the years, one of the first things he said to me was that he never wants the girls to forget where they're from. And he never wants them to forget their sort of their Buddhist upbringing. Right. And the second thing he said to me was that, however, the modern world is kind of encroaching faster than anyone can sort of stop it. And it's bringing a lot of good things too, in terms of healthcare and electricity and more infrastructure and all that. But he said he feels like they could move farther and faster under our care than, he kind of said that he felt like he's brought them as far as he could in that way. So even though he doesn't want them to lose their culture, or remember, he wants them to remember where they're from. He at the same time is really appreciative that we can kind of help prepare them for this other whole world over here, which is growing really rapidly. Um, so yeah, so
But
I
what do you
think,
want Karma to what do you want Karma to do for that area? Like what do you envision her to do?
yeah, it kind of goes back to your other point about the happiness. Like I I think, we have it in our world over here that we almost live in the future, right? It's like, in order to, we kind of build these dreams, right? Okay, you have to go to a good school to, get to a good university. You got to do well there. You got to get a university to get a good job. And then you can get a house. You can have a family. So we're always kind of living in the future, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Whereas they're not. They haven't been cultivating themselves like that, right? They're more looking at, okay, are we going to have the harvest for the winter? Or they're looking at things maybe on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. But there isn't this sense of like trying to create this whole vision and then, work backwards. Okay, like I've got this vision for my life. Now I got to do all these things like systematically. No, they don't do things like that. So like with Karma and with Pemba, I don't know. I mean, they're still young, right? So I don't want to say where they're going to be. But if I go back to the intention, back at the very beginning when we were having that first meeting in their little home, um, my intention was just like, if I can help provide choice for these girls, that's all I'd like. If they want to be in the village, then that's great, that's fine, but it should be on their own terms.
Sure.
But if they want to be elsewhere in the world, if they want to be in Kathmandu, if they want to be over here or somewhere else, I'd love for them to have those options as
Sure.
well.
Choice. Ah, man, that's so beautiful. Because I mean, if they go back to the village, they can help teach. They can do something, like just bring a different aspect, and they'll still be tied to that community. And, they can
Mm.
just bring different viewpoints and out. I guess an outsider's aspect, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, just kind of helping their own people
yeah,
in different
that's
ways.
awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's evidence of that happening with, I know other, not from that village, but other, kids who have gone through sort of international studies from similar villages, and who are now, they made careers for themselves over here. But say, for example, in 2015, there were the devastating earthquakes. These remote places got pretty much no help whatsoever. Most of the outside efforts were on the more of the urban centers. But these kids, from these remote villages, were able to run fundraisers and get support for their own villages. So things like that. I know another young woman who was able to get a grant to start a health post, clinic in her village. So it's coming back. Like, yeah, even though some of these kids have left their villages, gotten the education, they're still connected, which is very important.
Oh, they are the lifeblood, man. I'm telling you. Community. That's like the biggest
Mm,
thing.
yeah.
If you look at a lot of the blue zones that are out there, the areas that live the longest, that have like the most 107-year-olds out there, it's all about community. You see a lot of the different generations still living together in the same areas, and that's the one commonality, is that they have a very strong community and they don't eat processed food.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, no, and I think there's a lot in that. That was one of the differences, again, where when the girls were over here, one of the things that kind of surprised them. They're like, "Oh, why don't different grades of kids hang out together?" Like, why are the grade 8s, not allowed to hang out with the grade 6s or grade 5, because over there they all help each other, right? Actually, from a very young age, they all have to, like Karma was doing when she was 7, she was already kind of taking care of her 3-year-old sister. So they don't kind of segregate like that, like we do over here in those ways. It's more about, how can we help each other? How can we learn from each other? How can we, be with each other? So I think, again, just cultivating different values.
We all need to spend a week over there.
I think we could do if everyone could do some sort of cultural exchange. But,
Seriously.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, one of the things this journey has taught me is just about human connection and the importance of human connection. And especially, I mean, obviously right now in COVID, we've got these barriers because we can't see people as much. But I think this idea of, human connection is so important in our communities. Connecting with others, not only people in your direct circle, but, people who have totally different worldviews from you, right? Trying to understand different worldviews, because I've learned that, trying to understand the more I do that, not only the more do I understand, others, but actually the more I understand myself. And then the more we can make better choices to build better communities. So I think that's a key one is, how can we foster more sort of deeper human connection across cultures and perhaps continents in that way.
Absolutely. How can you mend the East and the West? Like, how can you mix that, right? Like in a healthy mix, not too much of one.
Yeah. Like, kind of learning from each other's cultures and different perspectives and that sort of thing.
Sure. What is, you talked about you're helping out Karma here, right? Like in helping her and her sister get the best education that they can get, so they can go back and help others. Like, what has Karma given you?
Well, I mean, both of them, those girls, well, their whole family. I mean, I feel extremely, I mean, I just had a birthday a few days ago and I remember, and when like our tradition is, okay, you get the cake, you blow out the candles, you make a wish, right? Which I've been doing just almost like not even thinking about it for years. But I remember getting the little birthday cake this year and I had the candle and I was like, I don't want to make a wish. There's nothing I have that I can wish for. Like, I feel extremely grateful. I actually just said what I'm grateful for. And one of the things is what the girls have taught me, just this idea that life can be so meaningful when we, again, uncover these deep connections and they might be in the most obscure places. We might never know who we will connect with, but to kind of live for those human connections, those deep threads that connect us on a very human level, and about, what can I do to give? Like, what can I give rather than what can I get? That kind of a way. That's what they've helped me understand, and that's just brought a whole new meaning to my life.
Oh man, I hope everyone listens to that over and again. Keep rewinding that. How can people reach out to you? How can they connect with you? How can they buy your book?
Well, yeah, I've got a website. People can visit that. So the website is just my name, michaelschauch.com. So that's MichaelSchauch.com. So there you can learn more about the book and where it's available. It's available wherever books are sold, Amazon or your independent bookstore would be able to order it. And you can connect with me. I'm on Instagram, Mike Schauch, at Mike Schauch. So yeah, I hope people will enjoy the book and pick it up and have a read. It's an adventure story, but it's a love story, and it's a story of, as I said, joy and deep human connection and things that I think we could all use a little bit more of in our world today.
I back it. I support it. I think it's a great book, and you definitely got an A in my grade book, pal.
My only disappointment is I can't remember the name of the prof. I'd love to send him a copy, but
oh, that's awesome. You definitely got an A in my class, brother.
Thanks, Troy.
What do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know what, to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about legacy. I just try and focus on the now, what I can do here, what I can do for these little girls, others, however I can help others now, and then everything else is kind of secondary.
I love that. Ram Dass, he said, be here now. Be here
Oh
now.
yeah. I love it. Yeah, and
Mm.
that's really what we can do. And anything that happens after that is kind of out of my control.
Absolutely. Mike, this has been amazing, dude. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Trey. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on your show here.